Hi, and welcome to Dietless Living 360 Degrees, Overcoming Weight Loss Obstacles with me, your host, Katie Gordon. As a weight loss coach, I help my clients to overcome their weight loss obstacles so that they can lose weight their way and lose it for life. And yet the old saying that it takes a village to raise a child actually applies to achieving our weight loss as well, because some of the obstacles that we have in life are in other areas of our life. We often have obstacles in our relationships, home, business, career, work, in our families. Sometimes we have injuries or other complex health issues that are going on that are impacting our weight. And whilst How to Overcome Weight Loss Obstacles in 6 Simple Steps shows you how to enjoy happy, healthy habits in those challenging times, we also need professionals to help us with those other obstacles. So with that in mind, Dietless Living 360 Degrees brings in those other professionals to help you overcome those obstacles. And today we have Kylie Madge. Kylie is a personal success coach and a spiritual mentor. She's also the founder of My Body, My Soul, and she supports single women who always thought that their life would involve being married with children, but now feel that's not looking as likely for them. So Kylie works with them to create a vision of the rest of their life that inspires and excites them. Kylie started her business when she herself realized that the marriage and kids that she'd envisioned being in her life may not happen. And she found herself stuck and questioning her whole existence and spent years wandering aimlessly in the dark until she realized that she could paint a new vision for herself and her life. And she now helps other women to do the same. And her mission is to support women to find a new path that they can feel equally satisfying and fulfilling, a path that inspires them to be open to all possibilities that can exist now and in their future. Kylie has a certificate in professional coaching, NLP, a master's in international business, and a bachelor of business. She also teaches yoga, meditation, and breathing techniques, and she helps women to break free from the change of their experiences and circumstances to see the gift that lies within. So welcome to the show, Kylie. It's so great having you with us today. Would you like to tell us briefly just a little bit about what it is that you do and the main way that you help your clients?
Sure, thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me, and thanks for that great intro. So I work with clients where they're at. So I work with clients one-on-one. I'm based in Brisbane. I work with people face-to-face. I've got a home office as well as online, so I have clients all over the world. And so meeting people where they're at, and it's really as you said, working with single women who have found their circumstances aren't turning out the way that they thought that they might, to start to move away from that place of, like I was, where I just couldn't see what the future would be because I just had this one picture in my head that I had realized I'd been conditioned to believe. And so I hope helping women to open up that field of what is possible. And as part of that, we uncover where some of those ideas came from. For me, that traditional wedding dress and family unit, as I started to, go through on my own personal journey, I realized that they weren't actually choices I had made for myself. They were conditioned beliefs that I'd grown up with, as everyone had said. When you're going to get married, when you're going to have kids, how many kids you're going to have, that this was imprinted upon me moving forward. So helping women to understand where these ideas come from and then to make their own choice and to be able to open up the field of possibilities and opportunities that might lie ahead. And not to say that marriage or children might still be a part, may still be a part of their future, but not waiting, putting their life on hold, waiting for that to eventuate. So being able to get on and live a full life and open your field up to all the possibilities that might be available to you.
Yes, because it's true, right? I often talk about that myself with my clients, and it's in one of the lessons that I in my online course about, the story of the lamb shank. Have you heard that one? Do you use that?
No, I
So
haven't.
it's the the daughter's there watching mum prepare a leg of lamb for roasting, and mum cuts off the shank, spins it, and the daughter says, "Why did you do that? Why did you cut the lamb shank off?" And she went, "Well, that's just how my mother taught me to cook it." And so they go and ask grandma, "How come you cut the shank off and threw that away?" And she went, "Oh, I don't know. That's how I was taught to cook." Luckily, great grandma was still alive. So they pop over to ask great grandma, and they said, "So, how come you would cut that lamb shank off and throw it away?" And she said, "Well, we didn't have a pan big enough for it." And, so we go through living our life doing these things that we were taught from the generations before, but no longer actually applied to the era that we live in, which is what you're saying, that you were raised as most of us were. I think there's not too much difference between our age group, our ages. We're raised to, that's what women do, but evolution has changed. Women's liberations come in. There's different options for us now.
Yeah, and it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a conscious, I would have loved that, but had it eventuated. But at the same time, I made conscious choices on what I was willing to accept and not accept for my own happiness. And, not everyone meets their Prince Charming, or, and for me, I wasn't willing to settle for somebody else that I knew wasn't going to be the right fit just to have children or just to complete that picture.
Yeah, such a wise move.
Yeah, so and I saw people around me at the time who were making different choices, and it wasn't, sometimes it was only a few years later when the wheels were coming off and it was all kind of crumbling down around them. So yeah, it's helping people, really getting a clear understanding of and being able to make that conscious choice of what is right for me. When you strip away all of the conditioning, all of the collective beliefs of many societal beliefs that we live in about what is acceptable or the correct path for a woman to follow.
Yeah, and it's just the norm, isn't it? Right? It's just been there through media and just societal expectations, not right nor wrong, just how it is. And things have evolved and changed, and it's nice to be able to catch up to that evolution and go, maybe I have some other choices.
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody who was buying a piece of furniture from me off Marketplace just recently. First thing he said to me, as we were having a chat as he came to pick it up was, are you married? Do you have kids? And it's like, no. It's like, because there's just that expectation. And whereas now I just answer and it doesn't trigger me in any way. I don't have any emotion or any story attached to it.
Yeah.
But go back 15 years ago and that was a different story. I would have emotion about it. I would be saying, why do they keep asking me that? Why, and then it would be about, well, what if I die? What do I do then? And completely different circumstance. And that's what I, help to other women to create for themselves, so they're no longer triggered by these situations, by these questions, which are coming from other people, well-meaning. They often come from family members. I even the situation, and I've got many of gay friends, but I had family members thinking I was gay because I wasn't married. And
under the assumption, well, she's not married. I wonder why. I wonder if it's because X.
Exactly. I must be. If I'm not married with a man, then I must be gay.
Yeah.
And so it brings up all sorts of different things that, even this closest circle around you often are the most triggering for you when you're in the moment, when you're feeling this place of longing for something that just isn't materializing.
I think that's it, right? It's that longing for something that you've set as a goal, rightly or wrongly, or however that goal's come about, but where you've set a goal, you've got an expectation about it will happen, in everything in social media and, you know, the world of law of attraction and all of that. It's like, it will happen. It will happen. But sometimes things don't actually happen. And perhaps there is another path and a plan B. And perhaps the plan B may even turn out a lot better than the plan A.
Exactly. And that's where the spiritual mentorship came through for me, because the more that I did, and the more that I understood and cleared back the layers and started to make other choices, I also started to begin to understand, exactly as you said, that there's lots of different pathways that are available when we open our field up to that. And when you start to kind of tap into that universal consciousness, then you start to create a belief that, perhaps that just wasn't my path. Perhaps that's just not what I was meant to be here and do this lifetime.
Yeah.
And that also makes it a much more easeful transition into making choices and opening up, the field of possibility and the steps that you're going to take next.
Yeah. And because, I do want to go deeper into this, and I'm going to take a little bit longer because so I never had children. It was my choice not to have children. It's a little bit funny when, as a 56-year-old, people now, when they say, do you have children? When I say no, there's a split second moment on their face where they don't know how to respond, because when you're younger, it's just like, oh, you've still got time. But at 56, they kind of realize, oh, so I wonder if this is a sore point, like, is it because you couldn't have them or whatever? And so there's that little conflict in their face there. But it's that moment for me is that I didn't want children. However, at this point, it's like, you start thinking about life and how much is left and what you're going to do with it. But I look at my family and friends who have kids, and I think, oh, I wonder if I missed out on something there, knowing full well that I was never meant to be a parent, but knowing that there are other places where I can make a difference in children's lives, through volunteering with kids and stuff. So I think for me personally, that's going to give me that satisfaction, that itch that's somewhere in there as a maternal instinct that I didn't think I ever had, but apparently I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that's interesting that you raise that, because I've just actually written a chapter in a book that's about to be released on the 26th of June called The Path. And it shares, this moment, what that decision point was where I decided to reach out for support and get this help for myself to be able to find that vision moving forward. And part of that is finding other ways that I could have children in my life.
Yeah.
And so I've got beautiful nieces and nephews, and great nieces and nephews now, and I have always invested a lot of time in being the best auntie that I could, and spending a lot of time with them and deepening those connections and relationships. But I also, as you said, I went off to Africa, and I volunteered with children and babies in Africa. And that, changed my whole perspective as well on there's so many children in the world who don't have the kind of life that we offer most children here, that, there's so many opportunities to be able to help in other ways, and to, you said, to nurture, children in other ways, and to receive that feeling back of being able to be, giving and supporting.
Yeah, that nurturing need that we all have, men and women do have it. And, and I think that's where the fur babies come into, we do live in such a great time, and we have all these wonderful pets and aisles full of things that we can spoil them with. But I think the fur babies do fill a gap for a lot of people, and what a wonderful way to do that. I think, but like you say, there's so many ways to nurture children, and there's so many children across the world that are looking for someone to fill that role for them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, part of the work of moving from this place of, for me and what I see in my clients is being that, why me? Why can't I have? Why isn't it happening for me? I might be dating, I keep meeting dads, why is it just not turning up? As you said, I'm doing all the manifesting, I'm, reading the spiritual books and stuff, and it's just not showing up. And to not make that about you, as an individual, because what often happens is that, I mustn't be pretty enough, I mustn't be smart enough, I mustn't, start comparing yourself to other people. And part of that is too, of that place of being in the longing, is looking at the other friends and families who have that dynamic of the kids and the partner and stuff that you're really longing for, and then getting caught up in that comparison and jealousy, that naturally happens when you're longing for something else.
Yeah.
So helping to move through and transition through that process. Because I know for me, I got to a point where I just didn't like the person I was anymore, because of all of that, because I was, feeling like, why me? Why isn't it showing up for me? What is it about me? And I also found, being a professional woman, like having a corporate career at the time in my 30s, there was lots of men that I met who were threatened by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then again, you'd start to be quiet and not share that part of yourself. And so, yeah, there's lots of different, as you know, with the work that you do with diet, there's lots of different layers to peel back and understand.
And that's it, isn't it? There's so many layers there.
Yeah, and it's a journey. So, as I said before, I meet people where they are at in their journey.
Yeah.
And so that, working one-on-one, you can allow that to unfold and tailor the types of exercises and support that an individual needs to be able to move from where they are at that point in time forward.
Yeah. Well, that's all really wonderful, because there are, I think, more single women these days than perhaps there used to be. There's certainly no shortage of singles. I know lots of people who are single, so it's really good that you are doing this work and helping women to find their happiness in other ways, because why put your happiness on hold while you're waiting for something else to come? I always talk about, we're sitting there, we're in the waiting station, it's like being at the train station and this train's going past and it's got happiness written on it, each one of them, and we're going, no, that's not my happiness train, I'm waiting for this particular one.
And reflecting back, I know now that it wasn't wasted time, but at the time I felt like I was wasted many years while I was stuck in that process. And that's what a real passion of mine is, to help people to more easily transition through more quickly through that process, so they don't have to spend so long in the muck, what feels like the muck of it all, that they can move forward more easily. And sometimes it's too, because I have like you tend to gravitate and find, and I moved from Brisbane to Sydney because I was just getting bombarded at the time with people asking me, when am I going to have a baby, when I get married? So I left, exit stage right, went to Sydney, and then found other corporate women in the same situation. So I have a number of friends, and in the process of writing this chapter for my book, I went and spoke to a couple and said to them, kind of, what was it for you? And checking in. And even though, majority of them say, I'm fine now, that I'm past it, I've gone through that process, they're older, but they still find that there's work to do, because they still will get triggered.
Yeah.
And I know for some, in our age group now, who are, looking to the future, caring, for me too, I've been caring for my mum who's not well, where she's been making comments about, lucky that, her and her sisters and stuff will have older daughters to take care of them. And I'm like, Mum, yes, but I don't, so there's a whole generation of us too who, as you start to go into the later years of life, don't have those children around. And they're not always very supportive. Not every child is supportive of their parents either.
Because you've got kids doesn't mean they're going to be there. But I understand the conversation, because I suppose that's one of the things that's been in my, you can't help but think about, what will happen to her? And I'm there, with my parents, and I wonder who. But I've come up with a plan.
Yeah.
So it's myself. I've got a couple of girlfriends, and whoever of us is left, we're going to pool our money. We're going to buy a house. We're going to make it a communal home with a centerpiece, where everyone's got their room, but the communal area for getting together. And we'll hire whoever we need to hire to help us. And we're just all going to live there in our version of, a commune.
Private living, yeah. And I've heard of other people doing that as well. And again, it just shows us other pathways.
Yeah, we'll be like the Golden Girls.
Yes, exactly.
So, Kylie, one of the things that I do like to talk about with people, and I think we've talked about one of your biggest hardships and obstacles to overcome, and I'm sure you have others that you would like to be able to share with us. What are some of the biggest obstacles? Maybe it is this one that we've just talked about, that you've had to overcome in your life, and what were the strategies and tools that you used to build your resilience, and just to move yourself emotionally, mentally, and physically through that hardship?
Sure. So, so I also had an alcoholic father. So had a dysfunctional home life. He was high functioning, but so there was marriage breakdown and stuff. So that's something that I suppose for me, it's the way in which I reacted to it was being very, I took the role in the family of standing up and being the buffer between my dad and my mum. Yeah. Whereas my mum, she would say, be quiet, so she really internalized things and would withdraw, whereas I would stand up and be the protector. And so, that created, moving forward, really put me in the masculine energy for a long time. In my 20s, a lot of anger and having to stand up and put forward my point of view, and standing up for the underdog type things. That's kind of, and it's a maturity, it's reaching out for help. One of the first things that I did, because I then took that, I moved off to Sydney, successive different relationships that didn't work out. I had an engagement, and then when we broke up before getting married, ended up in court with a protection order. Yeah. I was stalked for a number of time, for quite some time. That went on for a couple of years, and I lived in hiding for 10 years. Basically, I didn't have my phone number, my name anywhere on social media or on internet or anything, and that was a real challenge in coming to do this kind of work that I do now, and where you need to be on social media and open yourself up to start to actually be able to speak up and put myself out in public where I could be found.
Yes.
And some of the first steps that I took, and this is partly to how I got into the yoga, was going to meditation, because I also had the drinking thing, and when I got stressed at work in Sydney, there was a lot in the when I was down there in the early 2000s, there were corporate cards, lots of drinking at functions and events. It was a coping mechanism for a lot of people, and something that I was really attuned to. And that combination of stress and then having a few drinks because everyone was doing it. One of the first things I did was to start meditating. So I went off to the Buddhist Centre in Sydney at the Cross, and did a one-day intro to meditation. And then I explored all different styles of meditation. I started doing exercise, regular swimming. I went to that. It was something I used to do at North Sydney Pool. Then I found a naturopath, and that's where my business name comes from, and my body, my soul, because my body was so out of whack. There was so much tension and stress of old trauma, anger in my body. My adrenal systems were out of control. I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't eating properly. But that was the first place that I started, because until I got my physiology back under control, my sleeping back to where it should be, my ability to make good decisions and choices was compromised.
Yeah.
So that was the first two places that I went. And then I continued the exercise, and then I got myself, reached out for support, both holistic and coaching. So working at both from the spiritual and from the coaching perspective as well. Yeah. And they have been, the tools that I have used.
And they go together, don't they, right? Because you started with your body, getting your body back into shape and like getting your adrenals back to normal and, following that process, tidying up your lifestyle, getting more outside time and swimming and all of that. And then you move to bringing your mind back in, and yet that you can work the other way as well. I know I sort of went the other way. I'd already been doing all of that, but my mind was still like out there and not functioning for me. And it's like, how is my mind still giving me such a hard time and creating so much stress and anxiety for me when I'm doing so much, good stuff? But because the mind kept being such a problem child, it kept driving me back to unhealthy habits of, breakouts of, drinking too much, constant, and I don't mean in an alcoholic way, but just, every night having a few 2 drinks, 3 drinks, or 1 drink after work, and you start eating the wrong foods and all of that, and it's like chicken and the egg, it's just a vicious cycle. Whichever way it starts, or whichever one you clean up first, you ultimately do have to do both.
You do, and for me, because I was so in my head that I had disconnected from my heart.
Yeah.
And so I could rationalize everything. I could do to and from lists. I could rationalize everything, every behavior, every choice. I would tie myself in knots, not being able to make a decision, because I was looking at all of these different, if I do this, if I do that, all these contingencies, etc. And then I worked in that field as well, project managing, and so that was one of the things that, big things that I needed to learn how to do, was to actually quieten my mind so that I could actually listen to, reconnect with my intuition and learn to trust that. And that's part of that, coming back to the spiritual side and the my body, my soul, because that's, I believe that innately we have our inner wisdom and we just can't access it because our head is getting involved. Yeah. And so when you can quieten that and then just drop back down into and ask yourself, what do I really know is true here? And for me, I feel that in my body and I hear things, and have a knowing, then that just feels connected, grounded, makes just making decisions much easier. And I'm no longer in that fight or flight energy that I was, way back then.
Yeah. Yes, it's so important. It's like the main thing that I teach as well is just how to manage our mind, and so that we understand the chatterbox and everything, and what its role is and what its role isn't, because there's a distinction. We do need it. It does have a purpose, but it's the whole thing, everything comes back to a synergistic and holistic approach, so that we can manage ourselves as a human being in a human life, because so very few of us, as my wonderful friend Catherine often says, so very few of us are saints. And, we can't always expect ourselves to be doing absolutely the right thing all the time. And we don't have the luxury to go off and be a Buddhist monk. We live here in the real world.
Yeah, and I've always operated from the place of everything in moderation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being kind to yourself, because it's a journey and it takes commitment. I had a conversation, one of my yoga students today had a bit of a breakdown at the end of the class. Has got some stuff going on, workplace stuff as well as home stuff, and had a bit of a few tears. And she knew all of the information. Like, she knew, she'd been giving it to other teachers, this advice about, you know you're worthy, you know you're good enough, etc., but wasn't applying it to herself.
Yeah.
And it's being gentle with yourself, you know, because as much as you intellectually, and this is your head again, as much as you intellectually know the answers, and because I have a lot of people to resist reaching out for help.
Yes, yeah.
They've read the books,
We're
they've
strong women.
listened to the podcast, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And but you can intellectually know it. That doesn't mean that you can apply it to yourself.
Yes. That old saying, you can't read the label from inside the jar.
Yeah. And so it's really important just to be kind with yourself. And because the first thing that we often do is get the stick out and, you know, broken down. Why did I do that? Bang, bang, bang. You know, I should know better. But, you know, hopefully each time that something happens, you have an experience, you take away a lesson, a learning that you carry with you, so that you know, find yourself not having to repeat that same experience. And that's how we continue to grow, because sometimes it's without that experience, we perhaps didn't get the motivation that we needed, or the inspiration to, you know, step outside of what we know. Perhaps we learned something we didn't know before, you know, and it's an important part of our growth.
Curve, isn't it?
Yeah, important part of our growth. And again, it's how we perceive things, which comes back to the way in which we train our minds.
Yep.
It's the way in which we perceive the event. Do we go into it being all about, you know, woe is me? Or do we look at it from a different perspective, saying, well, okay, what am I going to take away from this?
Yeah. What can I do to change this? What's my next steps?
And what is within my control and what isn't?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many questions we can ask ourselves instead of just going, damn it, I'm so naughty.
Exactly. So in my situation, talking about, you know, partners and children, etc., you know, there were things within my control. I could still continue to date. Yeah. I could choose whether, you know, a person fitted or didn't fit. If they chose to walk away, I had no control over that. You know, if I could choose to go and have children on my own, which I chose not to, I could have done that.
Yep.
I chose not to. But you could choose to go and have, purchase sperm, do IVF on your own, adopt, foster.
We have so many options really these days, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. So what would be the biggest risk that you've ever taken, and why did you do it?
Interesting, because what I think is risky is often perceived by others as risky. Sorry, the things I didn't feel was risky, perceived by others as being risky. So, you know, one of the biggest risks that people perceived that I took, that I got a lot of external, well-meaning advice on, was when I left my corporate career. So I left corporate in my late 30s. I left and I went off to volunteer in Africa. I took a placement with Australian Volunteers International. So it was a 2-year professional placement working in Johannesburg, and left my corporate career. And so there was a lot of feedback about, of all the places in the world, why Johannesburg? What about the crime? It was, what about your super? I had investment properties here. How are you going to pay for your investment properties? You know, so for me, it wasn't a risk at all. You know, for me, because I really at that point had a very strong knowing that was my next step and where I needed to go.
Yeah.
But other people's perceived it as being very high risk, very scary. And then when I came back and chose to move back to Brisbane, and I made a conscious choice that I'm not going to work in corporate again, not in my profession. Yeah. And that was back in 2011, and I'm going to find my own business and way. That again, for other people, was a high risk strategy. But for me, it was something that I knew innately that I needed to do, and I was following my own guidance. And that's, you know, a big part of this work that we do is being able to not take on board other people's well-meaning advice and guidance.
Yep.
And to listen to what we really want, and that's part of the work I do is being able to get through all the noise, all of the other, opinions, and to find what lights us up.
Yeah. There's actually one of my favorite books called Where the Magic Happens by Casper Craven. He's an English guy, lives in Surrey. He and his wife got this idea they were going to sail around the world for 2 years with their two small children at the time. By the time they actually left, they had 3. And what his interesting take on people's opinions, the naysayers, and people just with genuine opinion and concern for their careers, their children, their safety, living on a boat, just everything. What they ultimately did was they went, well, instead of being discouraged by any of that or ignoring it, what they would do is they'd write them all down. Write down everybody's thoughts and opinions, and then basically go, great, thank you, we'll look into that. And then they'd look into it to see if there's any validity to it. And if there was, what they could do about that to still successfully maintain their mission of traveling, sailing around the world for a couple of years. And from that, they went, well, instead of, we just weren't discouraged by anybody. We took that, and it actually, the naysayers really helped us to solidify the real plan that we needed, because we were taking that, what we could have took as negative feedback, but we just went, oh, that's really helping us to work out the stuff that we weren't even thinking about.
Yeah. And it's and I also, from the spiritual side, there's different practices that you can do to energetically keep your energy filled for your own and not let that kind of stuff seep in. And it's like watching the news, and if you're watching lots, surrounding yourself by people that are kind of sucking your energy. There's different kind of different tools that you can use to energetically support yourself as well, to stop that your energy leaking out or other people's energy leaking in as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's the news. I don't watch the news or any of that stuff because I find that it just upsets my equilibrium.
Yeah, and see, I can watch any of that now and it doesn't touch me.
Yes.
So it just is, as you continue to do the work, your views, your beliefs, your tools that you use continue to change as you change. And that's
evolution.
Yeah, and that's why I work with people where they're at, because it's everyone's path is different. I believe that everyone has the same, very similar lessons to learn, but they show up in different experiences for each of us at different times.
Yeah, we all have to live the human life, don't we?
Exactly. Yeah, but at the same time, part of that human life is learning to connect to your soul, so the reason for your being, because you feel very much like a hamster on a hamster wheel, or a little ant in a colony,
following your ant path.
Exactly. If you aren't able to connect in and really find that those things that light you up, that give you a sense of, I know what I'm here to be doing, I know how to bring joy, for me, I want everyone to finish life feeling like they have no regrets and they have lived their life to the fullest.
Yeah, exactly, because we often are very clear on what we don't want. We're just not as clear about what it is that we do want and how to go about going to get it.
Yeah, and it's that joy and sense of, and I don't like to use passion or purpose, because that's very difficult, and I know that I never had a specific passion or purpose. I knew what I enjoyed doing, and I still don't have that definite, and I know now that actually is limiting to have be really specific in what you need or what you want to create. But it is important, because it's those things that light you up, that lift your vibration, that help get you in a state that you can start to see things, open your eyes, make healthy choices, feel good about yourself. So they're really important to be able to find the things that you are passionate about and you enjoy doing.
Exactly. And that's the joy of being living in our era. I don't know that everybody had as many choices in the previous generations to us. Yeah, they just didn't have as many choices. But I think it's really important now for us. We do have a choice. We do have more options available to us. And you're doing such great work helping women to sift through those choices, because sometimes we have too many choices as well, and you're helping people sift through all the choices so they can find what it is that they want to spend their life pursuing and their path to follow.
Yeah, and just to make that choice to move forward.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, because sometimes we can't see the choices because we're so stuck in the moment. So opening up that field and then tapping into your intuition to work out, well, which one we're going to go down. Because I know certainly for me, and it's maybe the same for you, Katie, is sometimes you go down one path and then you skip across two over.
Yeah.
Go down there and you skip to the next one, and that's part of life as well, of being flexible and adaptable. And when people talk about flow, being in flow, that's what flow is about, because some of those things you don't have control over, and if you get caught in the energy of it was meant to turn up differently at a different time, in a different way, then again that traps that energy, keeps us stuck in one place that we want to learn to be able to navigate in a more fluid way.
Yes, absolutely. So Kylie, could you tell me, because we're talking about voluntary change at the moment, women who are going to think about making voluntary change, and sometimes voluntary change is some of the hardest change that we have to do in life, because we have to actually move ourselves and motivate ourselves to do it, even though it may seem a bit risky, or it just seems like, everyone has a thing in their mind that change is hard. But there are some things that are hard and that we do voluntarily. So is there something that you've would consider the hardest thing you've ever voluntarily put yourself through, and why?
Well, sure, choosing to leave that relationship where I was engaged, and then having to go through, choosing to have the protection order and go through that process was huge. I didn't have the support of my family. My sister came, but they didn't believe that it was as bad as it was.
Yeah.
I didn't have the support of the police. Honestly, that was over 25 years ago, and I had the same issues then as what is happening now. And so the protection order was broken. The person was contacting my family, trying to get me to stop going through with the court hearing. And when I raised it with the police, they ignored it and did nothing about it. That was a pretty challenging change, process to go through. That was one. There's been many. But it was really important because it was impacting every area of my life. I would go to work and have a car sitting outside. I would have a person ringing my boss at work. I couldn't go anywhere and feel free and safe. So as difficult it was to go through the process and to not have the support of any of the structures around me, I did. When I eventually got to the final court hearing, the judge gave the police a dressing down, and my ex at the time also represented himself, and he got a dressing down as well. But there's a long process and many months to get to that point. And it's really about again, in that moment, I knew, because I had put off doing that. I went overseas for 3 months, took myself out of the situation, went overseas for 3 months, hoping when I got back that it would have changed. And it had already been 12 months before I left, hoping that would have just dissipated and it would have moved on. And the day I came back, the car was there at the front of my sister's again.
Right.
So no matter, I had wanted to just, let it go, not contribute to it.
Yep.
Didn't want any conflict averse. But, I tried all those things and it didn't work.
What would be, if somebody's going through something like that now, or they are about to make that kind of a move, what would be 3 tips that you could give that would be helpful for them in that situation?
Every situation is so different. So I didn't have the violence type stuff had only just started when I left.
Yeah.
But you never know. There's people who never see that, and then it turns. So I would certainly tell people, what's happening, and be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And once you get to that point where you make the decision to do it, stick to it.
Yeah.
See it through, and just look at whatever support is available to you and go and seek it out and do it. And it depends on how long people have been in that environment and stuff as well. Because everyone where they're starting, this is that starting point. Everyone's starting point is different as far as your in yourself, the inner strength and resilience you feel that you have in that moment.
Yeah.
Depending on how long you have been putting up with, in that environment. But certainly telling people about what's going on for you and then reaching out for support, is really important. And once you start taking that action to continue with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because we do keep it a secret, don't we?
Because we make it about us.
Yes.
And for me, it's another relationship that hasn't worked out, and what have I done? What, could I have done this? And that's why I put up with the stalking for so long.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, well, what have I done? What is it about me? What have I done? Making it all about me and making excuses for the other person. And that just delayed the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that, because it's really important, because there's a lot of women in the same situation. It's unfortunately more common than we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
We will be running out of time soon, unfortunately, because we've had such a good chat, which is great. And so I'd like to ask you, as a final sort of question, as you look back, because, we often look back over our life and we can see the trail of breadcrumbs that lead us to where we are, either through the trail of breadcrumbs through our careers or our choices. And so what is it about when you look back in your earlier career choices and your life, can you see that trail of breadcrumbs that's brought you right here to right now? And in a few words, what was that trail like?
Sure, and it's interesting because I went through a period, like it's kind of, like a curve. So I started, I did my degrees when I came out in the 80s, early 80s, we were in the recession. So I went into sales first before marketing. And in those sales roles, I was working in radio and doing account management and traveling around all over the place. And so the thing that has really, out of that experience, that's really carried forward is my ability to talk to anybody at any time. Yeah. But interesting enough, I did that for a certain period of time, and then I got shut down for 10 years. So in the work environment, I was okay doing that, but I couldn't do it outside of the work environment, as in a public forum like I am now. But those skills of being able to talk to anyone at any time have carried through. And also the marketing that I've done and the business that I've done, is that I've, worked in corporate for many years, gave me that understanding of all of the systems, the processes, and of course, studying my own business, then, for me to be able to adapt and, work on a back end of a website, or to, use Facebook, or to learn LinkedIn, to know how to write a post, how to, speak on a live on Facebook and stuff, comes really naturally for me because I have those skills that are just completely transferable across into my business today. So even though I'm not working in a corporate environment, in those, marketing departments in business, I'm still using those skills in everything that I do.
They were preparing you for this role, really.
Exactly. And the yoga gives me that connection to community, because a lot of the coaching is with people online on Zoom. And so that keeps me connected into my community. But for me also, the yoga is a tool that I use to keep my energy flowing. So for some people, they start with yoga and that's the start of their personal development process. But for me, it came after as a way to manage my energy in my body and get myself flowing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Kylie, because it's very important stories to share, because it's so universal for so many women. And where can people find you if they want to know more about your business and how you can help them?
Sure, the easiest way to find me is probably on Facebook. My page is Kylie Madge, just as it's written here on the screen, Kylie Madge, My Body, My Soul. You can message directly. You can also send me an email at info@mybodymysoul.com.au if you're not on Facebook. And just reach out, and happy to make a time to have a chat. And I do have a book coming out, The Path, as well as a collection of other authors, which shares a little bit more about my story and that challenge that we just touched on, of transitioning away from being that idea of being married and children, and it's brought me to where I am today.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show today, Kylie. It has been such a great pleasure to talk with you and learn so much more about you, because we've talked many times before, but there's so much I didn't know about you. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing that with me.
You're welcome. Yeah, and let me just finish, Katie, to say, because the stuff we have talked about is for people that whatever you're going through in your life in this moment, just to know that other people have experienced as well and come out the other side.
Yes.
And so just to know that if you're in it in the moment and feeling deep in it, that you're not the only one who has experienced those things, and and often people don't share, so you just don't know, but many people have similar stories and they have found a way out. So
exactly right.
Hopefully today's chat has helped you in some way.
Yes, which is exactly right. That's why we're here today, is for that, because we do all find ourselves in certain situations and we think, I'm the only one, but you're not. So for those out there watching, thank you for joining us today. And it is always so hard to say goodbye. So please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and do leave us a comment below if there's something that Kylie's talked about today that we've covered that has helped you to overcome an obstacle that you're currently facing. We would love to have that feedback in the comments. And please give us a like if you've really enjoyed our conversation today. And as always, we will miss you, and we will see you all again next time. So thanks again, Kylie, and bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.